welcome to MacVoices TV. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. And this time we are live with the Connecticut Macintosh Connection. Connecticut, it's good to see you.
They haven't been hit with the big snow yet, so...
Either that or they're snowed in and they're stir-crazy. One of the two.
They've been there for days.
And, of course, the other person, folks, that we have with us is Mr. Adam Engst of Mac Notables, TidBITs, and Take Control. Adam, it's great to have you over here on MacVoices TV.
Indeed. Nice to be here, and nice to be in Connecticut virtually. Not that I have anything against Connecticut in physical form, but it's a bit of a trip from here.
And it's even farther from me because I'm in Pennsylvania, but...
Well, I looked into it once, and Connecticut's one of those places that's actually from Ithaca, New York. It's hard to get to. You can't really fly directly, and so you have to, a number of flights, and if you drive, it's kind of a long way. And so it was one of those things, at some point a couple of years ago, I was invited to a group in Connecticut. It might have been this group, I don't know. And we looked at all the possibilities and decided that iChat was the best.
Yeah, sometimes it's just it's easier to do it this way. And it certainly makes it a lot easier because you and I just had dinner, and, we can sit down and talk to the folks in Connecticut and have a little fun. And
I had dinner?
Oh, well.
Wait a minute.
Well, my dinner was a bag of Doritos, so what are you going to do?
Oh, yes.
Well, we are doing our Road to Macworld series throughout the MacVoices group shows, and we thought this would be a good place to start talking to Adam about what he's going to do at Macworld, and maybe talk a little bit about Macworld's evolution without Apple and where it stands. So, Adam, you always are speaking. I know you're running around talking to people all the time, but what are your specific plans so far for Macworld?
The only actual session I have is, in fact, on Saturday morning, the last day of the show, when I'll be talking about macOS 10 Lion. This could be a very short talk. The idea is I'm going to be talking as soon as Apple announced Lion. Paul Kent at Macworld sent me an email and said, "Hey, we'd really like you to do a talk on Lion." And I said, "But I don't know if we're going to know anything more than what Steve Jobs has just shown us." And he said, "Well, we can do that. We'll have the macOS 10 Lion, what we know and what we don't talk." So I think there's going to be a whole lot of what we don't, because Apple hasn't said anything more, and I'd be just shocked if they said anything big before.
Yeah, when I saw you were doing this talk, Adam, I was kind of interested. I thought, wow, you must have the inside pipeline, because we've seen one very short demo and a lot of speculation, and that's it. So good luck.
Yeah, I'm going to be stealing a lot of screenshots from that video that Jobs did. So, it's kind of funny because, Apple was actually pretty clear about certain things they were doing, but they have a history of doing this kind of thing where they will give you some details, but not a ton of details. And so details, in a certain way. So, what they showed us in the Jobs demo was a whole lot of stuff about how Lion's going to be more like iOS. And that's interesting, but honestly, not to me. So, that for those of us who've been using the Mac for a long time, having it be more like iOS is not really a good thing. That, there may be little ways that it's improved, but realistically, we've all got our ways of figuring out how to switch between apps and zoom windows or not zoom windows and things like that. So, I was intrigued to see the changes they were making from the standpoint of just how Apple sees the future of computing. They really see iOS as leading the way in some respects. But at the same time, I'm a little distressed from the standpoint of it's not going to do much for me, and I want some features for me. I'm from the '80s, so it's all about me. So
yeah, but now wait a minute. You have an iPad, don't you?
I do.
Okay, so don't you honestly think that there's some things that are better done on an iPad with that touch interface than our executor on the Mac?
There are, but that's on the iPad. That as soon as you switch to a Mac, where I have a pair of 24-inch monitors and I'm using a mouse and a keyboard, it's just different. Plus, I've solved all those problems on the Mac. So, if I want to bring BBEdit up, I hit F1. If I want to bring whatever my current web browser is up, I hit F2. If I bring up, my current email program, I hit F3. I've been doing that since 1990. So those ways of working are really, really ingrained, and I'm really fast at them. So, if I was using the absolute stock stuff that Apple gives me, yeah, maybe I'd be interested in trying a new one, but I frankly find Spaces kind of pointless. Spotlight just irritates me. And so, I do things I do, and I don't think I'm unusual in this regard. I think all of us who've been using the Mac for years have worked out the ways we like to do things. And the iPad works in its different ways because it's a completely different metaphor. It's a completely different approach. And, I said this when the iPad came out. I mean, what's amazing about the iPad is that it becomes the device that when you run an app, it becomes that app. So with the Mac, you're always aware you're running an application on your Macintosh. With the iPad, when I'm using WeatherBug, it's a WeatherBug device as far as I'm concerned. It's not an iPad. And the same when I'm reading a book in iBooks, it's just iBooks. There is nothing else showing. And I think that's really key for the iPad experience, but I don't think that experience really transfers to Mac OS X.
Okay, so right after this, you're going to go out and tell the kids to get off your lawn.
It's 18 degrees and blowing here. I'm pretty sure the kids are not on my lawn.
Adam, whenever we enter into this discussion, I keep thinking about the fact that we are all, you're right. I mean, everybody here, a lot of the folks we can see in Connecticut have been using the Mac for a long time, but there are a lot of people that are just coming around to it. There's a younger generation that's coming around. They haven't solved those problems, and frankly, they don't want our problems. They don't need the deep applications. They need the one-trick ponies that do everything that is on the iPad. And I'm just wondering if that's not the future, and if we are starting to show our age, or you're starting to show your age, perhaps.
Well, that may be the future. I'm showing your age too, so. That may be the future in some respects, but if so, I think it's somewhat distressing. Don't get me wrong, I like the iPhone, I like the iPad, but there are things that you simply cannot do on them and will probably never be able to do on them because they're simply not capable enough. As I said, I'm working on a Mac Pro with 8 cores and 10 gig of RAM here. This machine is vastly more powerful than an iPad will be for many years. And, not that everything I do takes advantage of those capabilities, but a lot of things, start to touch on them. And if we limit ourselves to the kinds of things that work in an iPad interface on the Mac, I think we impoverish ourselves on the Mac. And, again, I'm not even using the serious stuff. You want to look at scientific engineering software, that stuff is really, requires heavy iron. And those people are not going to be putting up with an iOS interface.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I think that there is a very definitely a place for the more sophisticated interface. And I'm obviously playing devil's advocate because I have some of the same concerns and thoughts that you do. But I'm also drawing some parallels in the digital camera market where most of us had something that we could afford that was a point and shoot when we were kids, if we're in our general age range. And then you had to go and get the films developed, and you'd probably wasted about half of it. Now you're seeing a lot of people become a lot more sophisticated with cameras because they have the new digital technology. There's so many advantages to it, and so many things have been made simpler. Focus, exposure, all those things.
Yeah,
not
but
for
that's
the real shooters. But
that's even an interesting question. Charles Moorer wrote a really interesting article for TidBITs about this not long ago, and he was a professional photographer. And what he was complaining about was that we went from a point where the point-and-shoot cameras gave you autofocus and auto exposure and all that, and that was great. Now they've got 17 scenes and pro mode and this mode and that mode. And what he was pointing out was that for him as a professional photographer, it was overwhelming because he didn't know what these modes did. So he couldn't actually use them with any effect because they were impenetrable from a professional photographer standpoint. Okay. But then there's his wife who knows nothing about photography, and she said she's very happy with a point and shoot, except for the fact that she can't use these modes because she has no idea what they're going to do either, and it's too complicated to move among them. That they took what was a relatively simple interface, but when you have to decide whether you've got a beach scene or a landscape, and wait, but there's people in it, and suddenly you've missed your shot. That they've gone. In some ways, I think they've gone too far. And when I look at my Canon PowerShot SD870, so it's 2 years old, I think, at this point. It's not the latest camera. Even still, I put it on manual and get the settings set and leave it there. Because every time I try to figure out, oh, gee, I've got a different kind of lighting here. Maybe it's fluorescent lighting or tungsten lighting or maybe it's sunlight. It takes me a minute or 2 minutes to be able to get through all the menus. And that's the kind of thing where if you're setting up a shot, maybe you have the time for, but otherwise you've missed it. So they've done so much, I think, in some ways, that they've gone back towards difficulty. They've added a different kind of difficulty. And, what I worry, and I haven't thought this through even, what I worry a little bit is that Apple may do some of the same things. So for instance, a neighbor of mine teaches music at Ithaca College. And Ithaca College is a big music department. A lot of the major I want to say majors. But that would be English and Catch-22. So, in any event, he said that his students have no trouble with Logic Pro, or doing the music software. But if he asks them to put a file on a floppy disk, on a CD or a thumb drive, they're thrown. They don't know how to manage the file system. And these are current college students at a good university. And so this is the sort of thing where, okay, so we can say file management on the Mac is a little harder than it might be. But let's go look at it on the iPad. It's a total disaster on the iPad. You want to give a file to an app on the iPad, you've got to go through this horrible interface in iTunes. And it's only with that app. You want to open it with a different app? Sorry, can't do it. You've got to move it to that app separately, or you can sort of work between them. Each app has its own documents. And there's reasons why Apple's doing that, and it makes things simpler in a simple scenario. As soon as you're not in the simplest possible scenario, it gets way harder. So that's a case where I think that Apple is, frankly, doing people a disservice and will need to do something new in the next version of iOS. But I certainly don't want to see the Mac OS go in that direction with file management.
Okay, I agree with you on a lot of what you said, but I have to ask that it seems like we're always in an evolutionary period. Everything is evolving. But are we moving from, truly evolving from that file and folder structure to something where we don't manage our data? Now, I'm not about to argue that it's difficult to get things moved from one to the other. Everything okay, Chris?
Yeah,
I think our screen's everything.
A software update message came on the screen.
Quick! That one's really important. Get it right away.
God.
No, I agree with you on moving things into documents from the Mac to the iPad and assigning them to applications. I'm with you on that. We really need to work on that. But I'm also looking at how effective things like, I want to be careful here, but iCal or
Careful.
I know, but iCal is a great example because you can use iCal natively, and a lot of people probably do. In fact, I'll ask folks, how many of you in Connecticut use iCal? Okay. How many of you use BusyCal?
Yay, way better.
Okay, you should be using BusyCal, but that's another discussion. The point is that BusyCal doesn't require that management aspect. You just say, okay, BusyCal, I want to use you instead of iCal, or I can even bounce back and forth. I still don't know where my data is stored, but the app is smart enough to know for me, and so all's right with the world.
Yeah, I mean, everything there is stored in a database, and that's a nice idea. And the unfortunate reality, however, is that as you start syncing between devices and between programs, you get data corruption all the time. That it is absolutely common for people to say, how come all my events are duplicated? or for instance, I have a little event on every Monday that tells me the number of that TidBITs issue, so I can track, how far we're going into the future for sponsors and things like that. And for some reason, issues 1065 and 1066 and 1067 are duplicating themselves 5 and 10 times on those Mondays. Only those 3. Don't know why. It's just maddening though. And I mean, I agree with you that we need to move beyond the whole file folder metaphor. It's terrible. But Spotlight's a disaster. And the way that Apple has shown them doing things is locking documents to particular apps, which to me just feels short-sighted. I mean, it's one thing when Apple provides the app, so you can kind of have music in your iPad or your iPhone, and then have iTunes touch it and various other apps. There's a little one I have called Mood Agent, which is kind of cool, where again it looks at your music store on the iPhone or the iPad, and that's great. But as soon as you start getting into PDF, I have 3 or 4 different apps that can do PDFs. Good luck getting them to be able to use the same data, and trying to manage data, reasonably between them. So, honestly, I believe we're going to have to go to what's called a data soup. It was used by the BOS way back when. And, you're basically just having one big blob of data and a whole lot of metadata to move, to be able to associate things with different apps and to have them appear in different views and things like that. But, honestly, I don't know. I mean, we haven't really seen Apple make any changes in this regard in Mac OS X in a long time.
Wasn't the soup idea part of the Newton as well?
Yeah. And I'm, honestly, I wasn't enough of a Newton user to remember, but the Newton didn't really deal with files. You didn't have PDFs or text documents. I remember that you were dealing with in the Newton so much. So data soup may work better when you've got small stuff. You're not throwing your 50 megabyte Photoshop file in there. So it's possible, and and I hear things. There's a file system called ZFS, which people like on Sun Unix machines, and there's always academic research into new file system approaches, and so I have to believe that Apple's looking at some of that stuff. But realistically, we've got HFS Plus, and it's been around for a long time.
And it has, because it works, and there's also the learning thing where a lot of us don't want to learn something new. But it does feel like that we're being pushed into the future by the new devices and the new things we want to do, the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod. And Apple seems to experiment with this a little bit. I keep wondering if we're going to see the iPad become sort of an outboard touchpad maybe for our Macs in some fashion. Because I don't know about you or any of the folks in Connecticut, I've got the trackpad and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's the first thing that has replaced a trackball for me since I started using a Mac. So and that doesn't mean that's right, but more and more I'm using this instead of anything else to manipulate my Mac, other than a keyboard, of course, to enter data.
Well, I use this thing called a Roller Mouse Pro from Contour Designs, which I will attempt to show people here. Let me actually get my video up so I can make sure I'm putting it into into the camera properly. So what this thing is
What is that, an Edsel?
Yeah, it's really big because it's got a keyboard wrist pad built in. But there's this bar right here, and I can slide it back and forth to move the mouse left and right, and I can roll it to move the mouse up and down. So it gives me all the motions there. And then, as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons and a scroll wheel. And what's cool about it is that it puts it all right in front of my keyboard. Now I've got to get it all set back to my keyboard on it and everything. It puts it all right in front of my keyboard, and so I use it with my thumb and with a finger on the roller bar and a thumb on the button, and that that works pretty well as a way of manipulating things without being off to the side with the mouse, or doing weird stuff. So, I'd have a hard time, switching my pointing device at this point because I've been doing a lot. I've used the roller bar, the roller mouse for, I don't know, 9 years or 10 years now, and I'm pretty fond of it. But I do agree that we're going to be moving more and more towards a touch interface, and that is a good thing. I said I'm actually very fond of the touch interface and the direct manipulation aspect of the iOS. But Jobs is absolutely right. You cannot do a touch interface like this. It doesn't work. Even demos well, but your arm gets tired so quickly. What I'm expecting Apple to do at some point in the not too distant future is, frankly, to scale up the iPad in such a way that you can have it, on a desk in front of you, maybe, angled like a drafting table, or to have it flat. We had some friends over, and they were looking for a new house, and we had this little app called Zillow up that shows you what houses in a particular neighborhood are maybe costing, and the estimates are and everything. And they had an iPad Touch, and we had Tanya's iPhone and my iPhone, and we were all sort of looking at different areas and passing them around. And I thought, wow, what we really, really need here is, a big screen between all of us so we can actually all be participating in the experience of zooming around in this map and, pointing at different properties and, and all of that. Because it was really collaborative and kind of fun to do, but, doing it on 3 little screens was not as good as doing it would have been on 1 big screen.
I'm curious, folks, how about you all? How many people still use a mouse as their predominant device? Okay. Does anybody use a trackball?
No, trackpad.
Okay, now trackpad. Now trackpad. Okay, so we have a few converts.
Well, it might be
but
MacBook users.
Still the mouse. Well, that's true. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love the trackpad.
How many of you have laptops that are your primary machine? Okay, they may be the trackpad people. Okay, well, so much for that theory. I don't know. It's interesting to watch how Apple sort of is shepherding things. They seem to try things. They try to get us used to things and then move us in that direction. And the interesting thing, out of my perception, is that they're often right and we're often wrong. I tell you, one of my favorite analogies or examples, of that, when we first went to OS X, everybody had a stroke because, oh my God, the hard drive icon was not on the desktop where it had been forever. And
mine is.
Well, that was, but back then. And eventually they finally said, look, you don't need it, but we'll shut you up and we'll put it there. And I don't remember the last time I opened it. I literally don't need it. I could remove it and I'd never miss it. So sometimes. Well,
but see, the thing is I don't need my hard drive icon, but I do need all sorts of other drive icons. So, so it's not always the case. For instance, if I mount a disk image, I need to dismount the disk image. I want to get it from the desktop. I happen to like having it on the desktop as a way of finding it. I mean, yes, I could get it from the Finder sidebar, but I work with it as an object on the desktop because that's how I work with files. I'm one of those people who I use my desktop as an actual work surface. And so when I'm working on files, they live in my desktop. When I'm done with them, they get filed away. And so when I maintain a disk image of all the Take Control books, and if I copy a new thing to that disk image, I mount it, copy the file over, and then drag. Usually I select it on the desktop and hit Command E. I'm not a big dragger, but it is something where I still see the desktop, or sort of the desktop as a workplace metaphor. Still functions for me. That said, there's a lot of crud that I haven't finished with on my desktop.
Yeah, well, I mean that kind of goes without saying. I think we all have that, and we all get locked into our own ways of being productive. But clearly, we still have a long way to go. It's not like we found the perfect version of the OS. But
that's it. We have our own ways of being productive, and in my experience, Apple stinks at making us more productive. Apple is good at making things easier or prettier or sort of more obvious, but for my money, I have not had new things that Apple has done make me more productive. Spaces? No, I'd rather have 2 monitors. 2 monitors make me way more productive than Spaces does. Every time I watch someone use Spaces, it drives me up the wall. because they're constantly flipping around looking for things. Expose, only thing Expose does for me is it gets all the windows out of my way so I can see my desktop.
To get to that hard drive icon.
To get to the things that I'm actually working on. And I have, because I have the two big monitors, I have my dock way over on the right, and so my desktop, my main monitor is the right-hand monitor, so which is important actually because it puts the Apple menu right in the middle, rather than way the heck over on the left side. But that also means that my files, which I have sorted by date on the desktop, so that things I'm working on are always at the top right, are close to the dock for easy drags to different apps. So like when I'm working with PDFs, I need to open things in Acrobat 9 and Acrobat 7 and Preview and PDF Pen Pro at different times. So I can't double click them. I have to drag them to the appropriate icon on the dock. And they're, because of the way I've organized things, they're right there. So that's the kind of thing where, I'm not saying Apple's being bad. I'm just saying that none of the stuff that they've done has really significantly improved my productivity in a very long time.
But wouldn't you say it's fair that to say that Apple gives you a lot of choices? And that's one of the things I like about it. There's not necessarily one way, and not even always a best way to do something. You may think there is, and I may, but a lot of the folks that we're talking to may disagree completely. For example, you're sitting there with two big Dell monitors, Adam, that are giving
and crappy, I may add, getting blue lines on them.
But no,
they pop, and they periodically go black every now and then for like a second or two, and then they come back. Look, what's that all about? It's like you walk under a street light and it goes off. The only thing I can say is they were half the price of the Apple 24, or actually it was the Apple 23 at the time, and I couldn't, and then that one wasn't going to connect to my Mac Pro in a useful way. So it was the 24. Apple just came out with the 24, which wouldn't connect to my Mac Pro at all because it was mini DisplayPort.
Right.
And so I was annoyed that I had to buy the Dells, but the quality was generally okay until it started to go downhill after a couple of years because they're cheap.
But the thing is, you're sitting there getting a tan with two monitors. Some of us live on our laptops, and for that, Expose can be extremely useful. I know because I've used it when I don't have my second monitor. I mean, I'll tell you right now, my iPad has become my second monitor with a utility that I can't remember. Air Video, I think. No, that's not.
Yeah, Air Display.
Air Display. Thank you. So now I'm carrying two monitors with me, for crying out loud. So I'm not sure I can agree with completely.
Okay.
It suits you.
What I will say is that Apple gives some features, but realistically, the flexibility to do what you want to do on the Mac comes from Mac developers. It does not come from Apple. I have my keyboard stuff is all via Keyboard Maestro. BusyCal does better than iCal. Many more capabilities there. Chrome and Firefox do things that Safari doesn't do. I'm trying to think of I've got let's see, just looking through my bar here, I've got Hazel for managing certain kind of file things automatically. I've got Transmit for file transfer because the Finder has never been a halfway functional FTP or WebDAV client. That's BusyCal. Let's see. I have a little thing called Menu Meters, which puts lets me see Activity Monitor stuff in the menu bar because Activity Monitor, you can run it, but it's a pain to have it. I'd much rather have that stuff in the menu bar. So I'm not disagreeing that Apple provides some flexibility, but realistically, the good stuff comes from developers that are not at Apple, and that's why I think that the iOS has a bit of a different role here because you can't change the behavior of iOS. And that sort of thing is not allowed, and Apple's not going to allow it because of security and stability reasons. I mean, they only allow it on the Mac because they'd have a revolt if they didn't.
I can't argue with any of that.
Good, then don't.
No, I can't. I mean, I do think though that there are times that Apple could do a better job on certain pieces of software. On the other hand, I'm sort of glad that they don't lock it down completely, like has been the case in a few areas with the iPad and iPhone, where they say, okay, if you're going to duplicate some of our core functionality, you can't play in our sandbox. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that serves the long-term goals. I do like the idea that they are exercising as much control as they have, because their devices are pretty darn stable, as opposed to some of the others that I keep hearing about that are restarting or crashing and burning, or maybe just getting blue lines in them, like the Dell monitors.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two. First, there was one. It was right down the center of the like an inch from the right side of the left monitor. And then now there's two over there. And what's weird is they come and go. I mean, I say you got to love that quality control.
Michael Dell, where are you when we need you?
I don't want my monitors. So in any event, no. I mean, I honestly, I mean, Apple obviously does a very good job, and I harass them because, frankly, I think they need to be harassed. They cannot, just the fact they're doing a better job than Microsoft and a better job than most anyone else, in other spaces, doesn't mean that they're doing things perfectly. And, I honestly, there's a certain level of, I want to be the loyal opposition. Those of us who've been doing this for a long time, who use our Macs for more hours per day than I probably should admit, we have some strong opinions about how we need to get productive work done. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be great if you're a Twitter and Facebook and email and web user, and that's about it. Under an operating system where you can't do anything interesting. But as soon as I'm sitting here, writing TidBITs articles in BBEdit, uploading them via a Subversion version control system to our content management system hosted on a virtual server somewhere. It's virtual. I don't know where it is. And managing all of that in a web browser that, again, needs to be fast because I'm doing it day in and day out every day. That's the kind of stuff that, I can't afford to have it be slow. I can't afford to be switching one app at a time. I need to see all this stuff simultaneously. I'm writing and editing too quickly, and I don't have the time to fuss with anything that's going to slow me down. So, and I mean, honestly, Keyboard Maestro is one of those things that I just rely on, because I end up with things where I find myself doing the same thing over and over again. And after a little while, I can automate this. And, a few minutes later, I've got a Keyboard Maestro macro that does it for me. Or Automator. Actually, Automator is something which, I didn't use it for the longest time, and I don't use it a lot now. But when we publish a Take Control ebook, I have to put the final file in 2 or 3 places on my Mac, in zipped form and straight form and this and that and the other thing, and I have to upload it to 5 different places on the web, all related to our content management systems and things like that. And I've gotten Automator and Transmit now set to do all of that. So now it's just a matter of selecting the final file, control-clicking it, choosing my service, my workflow automator from the services menu, and it just goes and does it. This was 10 minutes of work before. None of it was hard work. It was just, dragging it to the right, window. But having Automator just do it for me perfectly, that's real, that's worth money. And so that's the sort of thing where, I'm not an AppleScript guy, but being able to do that and put it all together has made my life better. And that's a technology that we don't often see, because you have to get to that hump of, I can't believe I'm doing this. Okay, I'm finally going to bite the bullet and spend the extra time to automate it.
Folks, didn't Adam just say a little while ago that Apple hadn't done anything to make him more productive in a whole lot of
Automator? That's how old is Automator?
Well, it's your fault for not keeping up. No.
Well, and seriously, this is the first time I've used Automator. This is, and I did this, I don't know, earlier this year, 6 months ago, where I just sat down and said, oh, gosh, there's got to be a way to solve this problem of uploading the same file to 5 different places, and, and zipping it, and I said, I don't do AppleScript. That's, I'm just not that much of a programmer. But being an Automator, frankly, freaky as all get out. The hoops you have to jump through, the bugs in the bugs in it, it's crazy. But once you beat some sense into it, it actually can do some pretty cool stuff.
Somehow we got way away from Macworld, and I want to go back to that.
We always always do that.
Well,
That's the goal. My goal is to get you as far from the original topic as possible.
yeah, anybody that listens to the shows knows that. I'm curious, how many people there at CTMac are planning on going to Macworld? Anyone? Okay, see, that's two things you have to do. Number one, you got to use BusyCal. Number two, you have to come to Macworld. And Adam, you and I talked before we started talking to them. You know, our experience at Macworld may be a little bit different than some people's, but it seems like Macworld has something for everyone. You and I go to see friends, not necessarily like we used to go and see new products, although there's still a whole lot of that involved with both with what we both do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, and as a Macworld is, I know so many people that my standard modus operandi is to walk for a minute or two, talk for 20 minutes. Walk for a minute or two, talk for 20 minutes. Because I just keep running into people I know, or I get to a company's booth where I know the people, and, you know, even if they don't have anything new, you know, to show me, they're people I know and I want to say hi to. And that's unusual, and I grant that. But what I like about Macworld is that there's a certain serendipity that the internet has obviously brought access to all of the information that's disseminated at Macworld. You know, true confessions, back in the early 1990s, I would go to Macworld Boston and I would get the handouts. Every company would have their handouts, and I'm really good at this kind of thing. I would get all of them from all of the companies that I would thought were in the slightest bit interesting. And I would go home with pounds and pounds of paper. And then I had a filing cabinet with folders, and I would all file them by the company name. Yeah, it was really ridiculous. I don't think I ever used it. I mean, it's not entirely true. I probably pulled stuff out periodically for TidBITs, but this was pre-internet and pre-web for anything beyond email. And so you had to do that kind of stuff if you wanted to get the information. I didn't like calling people. And it was long distance. I mean, back in the days when there was this thing called long distance. So now you don't go to Macworld for the information that's available online. You go for the information that's not available online, which is the program that you use. You can ask questions of the programmer. You know, if it's a program that you're thinking about buying, you can ask questions that are not answered on their website. You can ask how it integrates with this other program that you use. You can lay your hands on hardware, which, you know, yeah, you can do that at certain stores, but not so good much on the internet. You know, the whole trying of the cameras doesn't work very well on the internet. So, you know, that's what I think, you know, is sort of for people who are not like me and not like Chuck. Just being able to go and talk to the real people behind all these products and behind all these stores. You know, busy Mac guy. He'll tell you, and you know, but he's a nice guy. He's not going to brag about his products. So one of us will be hanging out, you know, chatting to him, going, "No, look at this too." And that happens. You know, there's a whole lot of people just sort of, you know, showing each other cool stuff because they happen to be at the booth where they know something about the product. And this is more with the little companies, honestly. You know that you know, the bigger the company, the more difficult it is to find people you know or to get into some of these kinds of conversations. But even the big companies will bring tech savvy folks, so you can track them down if you spend the time.
Last year was a bit of a transitional year for Macworld, with Apple not there for the first time, and there were a lot of people that, you know, were watching it. And I have to tell you, and without calling any names, I came away very annoyed at some people in the Mac community in specific and the tech community in general who said, "Oh yeah, I stopped by, you know, I did the whole show floor in an hour and a half, and, you know, then went for drinks." And
ball. I mean, you know,
I was there the whole time, and I still could have used another day to get to talk to everyone I really wanted to talk to.
That's nonsense. I mean, the fact is, you know,
it is. Yeah, I agree.
Apple was the least interesting vendor at Macworld. You can go to any Apple store and see exactly the same thing a couple of days after they announced new stuff at Macworld. And the people that Apple had working at the booth, they're Apple employees. They're not stupid or anything, but they haven't seen this stuff before either. It's not like you're talking to the product manager. You're talking to some random person, who works in some other department who got, a couple hours of training maybe the night before. So, every time I would go to the Apple booth when they were there, it was random. The people I was talking to didn't really know any more than I would after a few minutes of playing with the stuff. And, again, Apple stores are everywhere now. So it just didn't mean that much, the Steve Jobs keynotes, always fun. Won't deny that one bit. The man gives good keynote. So it's, that's the only thing that I miss in some ways, although on the other hand, from my perspective, not having to cover 6 new products, in the hour after the keynote makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think I sat with you and Tanya and Rich Mogul, if I remember correctly, at the last keynote that Steve gave, and you all had a ridiculous amount of equipment that you brought in so that you could be actually working on it right there, so that when we stepped out, in fact, I think you were trying to do it before we stepped out, and it didn't work out.
Oh yeah, when the musical guest is on, we're writing.
Yeah, and I watched it and almost felt sorry for you because you had that kind of pressure to get it out, and I understood it perfectly, but you didn't get to quite enjoy the whole experience as much, and yet.
Well, and what you didn't see is that we then went and sat on the hard floor in Moscone West, because there were no chairs or anything like that, for the next hour, and as a group, and wrote and edited and posted stuff so we could get it up, and then we got to go do the show, an hour or two later. Right. So yeah, it was a lot of work. I don't miss that one bit. As I said, it's fun seeing the Steve Jobs keynotes, but Apple's televising or webcasting those a lot more now. I think that's brilliant. It's going to put all the live bloggers out of business.
Yeah, I agree. I always just stress to people, though, that Macworld is so much fun because you go and you get to meet the people that you hear from or read or listen to, whatever, throughout the year. They're all there. But more importantly, as Adam said, you get to go and see the developers. You get to talk to them. You find out they're real people. I think we all, well, I won't speak for everyone. For me, I had a lot of misconceptions that these were, big, huge companies with all these names, and in those days sending out glossy brochures. And then you go up to the booth and somebody introduces himself as John, and he's the guy that wrote the program, and he and his wife do the company. Well, I sort of like a publishing couple that I know.
Yes. Well, we try to look small. That's the difference.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and you have an international staff.
I think the whole approach of trying to look big is just dangerous these days, and doesn't really help. I mean, everyone appreciates a small organization trying to do good work. If you try to make yourself look bigger than you are, you're just setting yourself up for problems when people assume you can do things that you just can't possibly because you don't have those kind of resources. So that's where the term now is indie developers, independent developers. And I think they really like being seen as independent developers, without all the trappings of, a large company. So, and we have lost some of the unpleasant parts of that, such as the booth babes. Remember the booth babes from, mid-90s when you'd have the big companies, hiring attractive models who knew absolutely nothing.
So what's your point, Adam?
Oh wait, I'm sorry. You're nostalgic for that, Chuck.
I just asking.
It was just really frustrating because you'd want to get some information. You go up and ask the very nice person at the booth, and she would have no clue. It was clear that she had absolutely no idea what the product did at all, and was at best able to point you to another person if she had met them yet, because these people usually weren't even employees. So it was just meant for male eye candy, frankly. As I said, it's a trend that has gone away in the last 5 to 10 years, not one that I miss.
You bring up something else that's good. That made sense for the usually male audience. I think Tanya and 3 other women could be counted on one hand a lot of the time. And now the crowd is much more balanced. You're finding so many more women in tech, and I don't mean that in a gratuitous sense. In fact, it's very refreshing to find women that have the chops to get things done as well or better than men. So you stop thinking about them as, okay, you're a man, you're a woman. It's just, you've got the information I need. Let's interact.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we run into time and time again, and the industry is still predominantly male, but it is nice to see increasing amounts of women coming in and staying and doing really important stuff. It's a little bit less obvious, I think, actually on the internet because when you look at kind of the well-known editors at major magazines, not too many of them are women. And the ones that are tend not to do as many of the public events, just what we happen to have seen. And when they've had the, who's most influential awards, again, mostly it's not women. And that, I think that's a shame. It's just, it's sort of, it's who people know. And when people don't really think about it, they tend to concentrate on mostly the men that they know. So. But anything that increases the diversity of the community is a good thing in my mind. One of the things I like about Macworld, honestly, is when people from other countries come. I run into people from Brazil or Germany or Japan, and people who have been reading TidBITs forever. And what's fun is they often, and I'm not, for anyone who is seeing this from another country, I'm not fishing here, but it's always fun if they give me a little present. Like the MacMania folks once from Brazil gave me a MacMania T-shirt. It's this great T-shirt from Brazil, and I once got a T-shirt from a user group in Finland, and and those are things that I think about those. The Beelight software people once gave me vodka because they're from Ukraine, and it's just fun stuff, and it's a way of sort of making it clear that it's just people. And Chuck has been known to bring Hershey bars from nearby Hershey, Pennsylvania. So it just, I don't know. It's a nice way to make it a little more personal.
There's another great point. Last year we had a dinner that was the night before, 2 nights before the show started, and we had 8 different states represented from the United States. We also had 8 different countries represented at that dinner.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. You just feel like if we could just invite the UN to Macworld, the world would be a better place. Because everybody has that common ground. Even when there's a language barrier, you still are talking Macintosh technology and what you're doing with it, what you want to do with it. And it's so much fun, and you come away with so much.
Once long ago, at Macworld Boston, 94, 95, something like that, I met a group of the group of guys who translate TidBITs into Japanese. They'd actually all come over. But the problem is they could read English, and they could kind of understand it, but they couldn't really speak it. So I think one of them could speak a little bit more than the rest of them. And for some reason, we ended up hanging out for a morning after the show, which was, it was kind of fun, but at the same time sort of awkward because I had this little group of Japanese guys who was, walking around, and I felt like I was kind of monologuing at them because I couldn't really converse back and forth. But it was indeed fun, and yeah, we, as I say, you just never know who you'll meet, and there's less in the way of the social events afterwards than there have been in previous years, but there's still plenty of stuff to go to, and you can always meet someone on the floor and you can say, hey, let's get some dinner tonight. What are you doing? So there's lots of possibilities there.
Yeah, if you go to Macworld and you go back to your hotel room after the show closes, you're missing some of the best part. Just walk up to anybody and say, let's go, and they'll do it. Adam, let's take a break here. I want to check with Chris and see how we're doing on time and see if any of our friends in Connecticut have any questions that they'd like us to address.
Yeah, that'd be great to open the floor to questions. Anybody have any questions? Actually, could you come up here so that's it?
Yeah, we're going to make you come up and get on camera. You can't just sit in the back row.
Either that or you have to hand sign.
Just stay right there.
Act it out.
Just hold it. Charades. Why is Apple getting away from their server division?
Why is Apple getting away from their server division? Because they made some early design decisions that weren't very well thought out, and then they never solved them. So Chuck Goolsby, who's a longtime friend of ours, used to work at Digital Forest, where our Xserves were. Wrote an interesting article about the Xserve that we published in TidBITs right after the Apple canceled it, and he made some really good points, which is that Apple had come out with the Xserve at a point in time when it was a really, really cost-effective machine, and they simply didn't keep up. They didn't do the kinds of things they needed to do to stay competitive. And, the other thing, honestly, is Mac OS X Server is great if you need Mac OS X. But if you are doing more standard internet serving things, like you just need a web server, you need an email server, Mac OS X Server is weird as all get out. And so, the basic capabilities of a Unix sysadmin, when applied to Mac OS X Server, you end up overriding everything. And so, I liked Mac OS X Server at first when we were sort of using its capabilities at the user, the graphical user interface. But as soon as I said to Glenn, can we do X? And he said, well, yes, but then I have to reconfigure Apache. Then we started to get into a situation where if we even so much as ran server admin and touched the configuration of Apache, it would overwrite all of our configuration changes. They didn't play very nicely, frankly, in the server world. And so, I think the way they've pulled back with the Mac Pro server and the Mac Mini server makes some sense. That if I was running a 20-person office and I wanted to do email and backups and stuff like that in-house, it was very important that it be in-house, and I didn't want to use Google Apps, for instance, then, a Mac Mini server or a Mac Pro server with Mac OS X server still makes sense. But at the Xserve level, they were just getting their lunch eaten. And, honestly, we moved from an Xserve to a virtual private server, or a virtual server, not a private server, at Rackspace. And part of the reason why we did that was that we were having issues that were going to require that we buy a whole nother Xserve just to know if it was a hardware issue. Probably wasn't, but it was untestable, and at the hard drive level, anytime we thought we might be having a hard drive issue, okay, buy another hard drive. That was the only way of testing it. And as soon as, because our server was off-site, it was a real pain to do anything with hardware. And so, when faced with all that, we said, let's make the break. We're not really using hardly anything that's Mac specific at this point, and because we have the in-house expertise to run a standard Unix server, we could get a lot more server for a lot less money when we went virtual.
And I have to throw my
That's my theory.
Yeah, I look at it and I sometimes think that it's just simply that Apple is deciding where they want to focus. They've
never focused on servers though.
Yeah, exactly.
They've made token. I mean, not to take anything against say anything against the Xserve initially, or what the Mac OS X server group has tried to do, but they've always been small groups that are ancillary. Essentially hobbies like the Apple TV in some ways. And you're right. That's not their focus. Their focus is consumer level, iPad, iPhone, iPod.
And if you think about it, it's not unprecedented. They got out of the laser printer market a long time ago, and they were a major player. I mean, that was one of the things that Apple kind of got started with. And
Apple's even been in the server market before. I mean, they come and go. Remember the Apple Workgroup servers?
Oh, I forgot about those.
Yeah, they had some pretty cool hardware with the Apple Workgroup servers, and they had, all sorts of. It was the Apple Workgroup Server Solution and the Apple Internet Server Solution. They had software bundles and all that kind of stuff. And Jobs came in and axed them all, and then they brought them back at a point when the Xserve really was important, as for the the price and performance range. But they couldn't hold it. They would have needed to have put a lot more effort into that division. They just didn't have it. Okay, other questions?
Do we anybody else have a question? Jerry, come on up.
Hello, I'm Jerry Esposito. I have a question for Adam. You've been writing these books, Take Control books, for quite a while now, and I'm wondering,
yes, I write all of them personally.
Well, I mean, editing, publishing, and all that.
Yes.
My question is, there's a lot of different formats now for reading these, and how are you approaching all of that? And do you see, as ebooks become even more popular, do you see your company selling more mainstream type of books?
Let me actually go there for the second part of that first. Is do I see us going more mainstream? And the answer is no. It has nothing to do with the ebooks versus anything else. What we've learned over the years is that we have an audience. Our audience is, frankly, folks like you, people who read TidBITs, who know about the Mac, know about Apple's products, and are interested in learning more about them. And that's the audience we can reach. So we've tried a couple of times to go beyond our core audience. We had a wonderful book, still do, in fact, highly accurate, still completely up to date, Take Control of Thanksgiving Dinner. And, it was Joe Kissel wanted to write it because he's a real foodie. We're all, a bunch of us are majorly into food and cooking as well. And we thought this will be interesting to do a completely different book. Sold horribly. Complete flop. Has nothing to do with whether or not the book is good. Simple fact is our audience isn't that audience. And we aren't able to access the kind of people who are buying cookbooks. So it's pretty unlikely that we'll be expanding our content type all that much in that regard. Now, where I think we will probably be going, and that's because in part Joe is so thoughtful about what he wants to be doing, is if you look at one of his most recent books, it's Take Control of Your Paperless Office. And that's a really interesting book because it's about technology and using technology, but it's not, or rather it's about using technology, but it's not really about, how to do something specific. It's about, how you use technology in an aspect of your life. And I could see Joe doing more of those kinds of things as we move forward. So that's sort of how I see us expanding, beyond purely documenting what Apple's doing, for instance, or writing books about Devon Think or PDF Pen or those kinds of programs. Now, as far as the formats, it's kind of a mess, honestly. Most our native format is PDF, and PDF, everyone knows it. It's really easy to read PDFs in Preview or Acrobat or Adobe Reader. They're even viewable on the iPad pretty well now on iBooks. There's some PDF programs, other programs from other companies like Goodreader. There's a new one, Bookman maybe? I can't remember the name of a book, something, which people have said is really, really good too. So PDF is a really nice program for this kind of stuff, but PDF has the basic principle that you're designing something for paper, or at least for a page. You're designing for a page. You know what's going to be on that page. You know roughly how it's going to look. And that's great, except for the fact that it falls down when you go to the iPhone. And it falls down because the screen is just too small. So, even though our books are frankly pretty good on the iPhone if you rotate it to landscape mode and, zoom up to the column size and all that, it's still, it's not ideal. And so when Apple came up with the iBook Store, they required that everyone use a new format called EPUB. And technically EPUB is all caps. That's just the way the consortium that created it, the way they capitalize it. It's, but EPUB is different than PDF in the sense that it is reflowable. So as an author, or a publisher, you don't design a page. It's more like designing a web page where you set styles and people can change the font and people can change the size of the page, and things then have to reflow around. Excuse me. Sorry. And so EPUB is, it's a lot like designing web pages. It's an XML format. You're in fact doing HTML and CSS under the hood, but it's kind of funky, and there are not very good tools for you creating and modifying EPUBs at this point. There's also another format called MobiPocket. which is common. It's a Kindle format, and Kindle, there's a couple of other Kindle formats, and you have to use those if you want to be on the Kindle, because the Kindle doesn't do EPUB, and it does PDF, but not well. So those are the three big ones, and there's various others. Now, right now, what we do is we produce PDF, and then we give our books to O'Reilly, who we work with, O'Reilly and Associate, O'Reilly Media. They do, they have their another publisher, but they basically do publishing services for other companies as well. And I'm not real proud about this, but they send our books to India, where they are converted from PDF to EPUB and MOBI. And the reason why we do this is because, frankly, it costs like $50 to $60 to convert a book to EPUB, and I can't. Basically, anything I do right now will cost me more than that on a per title basis. So what I'm hoping is that in the future, not too distant future, hopefully, we'll be able to change our publishing system so that we'll be able to get PDF, EPUB, and MOBI out just as a matter of course. And partly we want to do that because, frankly, the people in India don't do the best job possible. I mean, if we complain about something, they fix it and they stop doing it going forward and all that. But, it's not what we would do because we're really, really persnickety about stuff. And so we, our level of how much we care is not how much they care. The other problem with the O'Reilly conversion is it takes a couple weeks. That we send them a book and, somewhere between a week and 10 days later, we get it back. So we can't make the EPUB and MOBI files available immediately. We have to wait for them to come back to us. So my take right now, honestly, is that the best reading experience on a Mac or an iPad is PDF. No questions, at least for a take control book. And that's because we make good books. We make books with bookmarks, with lots of internal links. There's a table of contents, all that kind of stuff. On an iPhone or an iPod Touch, however, you're going to want to go for the EPUB version. And simply put, the smaller screen makes the reflowable aspect, work so much better on the small screen. Now, something that I don't know how many of you there have tried this, but everyone who buys an ebook from us ends up with an account on our website. And one of the things you can do with that account is you can log in and download the EPUB and MOBI files for any of the books you've bought. So when you buy a book from us, you get a PDF because that's our core format and it's available right away. But as soon as we have those EPUB and MOBI files, we make them available for download, and you can download them and then pop them on your iPhone, or if you have a Kindle, you can pop it on the Kindle. And that's the best way to do this kind of stuff. We would like to be working with the iBook Store more and better, but frankly, they're really, really hard to work with. All the effort that Apple puts into the consumer and user-facing stuff, they do not do on the back end. Using Apple's internal systems as a developer for the App Store or as a publisher for the iBook Store is, painful beyond belief. So,
I have to ask, do you think that we're in a format war here, a la Blu-ray and HD DVD, or, God, if we go the whole way back, VHS and Betamax? And it's almost two-dimensional because not only do you have the file formats and their incompatibilities, but you also have store formats, the Amazon Kindle store, the iBook store.
It's a little bit, you're all right. I mean, there's a little bit of a format war going on, but keep in mind there are probably billions of PDFs out there. PDF is one of those formats that is just utterly ubiquitous. I mean, think about all the government documents and forms that are in PDF format right now. So PDF is not going to be going away in any way, shape, or form. That said, part of the reason why things like EPUB came about is because people did cruddy PDFs. That if you just print to a PDF, it's as bad as a piece of paper on your screen. You could be holding that piece of paper up to your screen, and it's just like reading it on screen. It's only, in relatively few people put the effort we do into making PDFs really good. And it's not easy, honestly, because the tools to create good PDFs, not so hot. Adobe has not done a great job on that, and other companies, do what they can, but it's still not trivial. So I think PDF is not going away, but I can see why people wanted more than what PDF can do, particularly as you got into mobile devices. Now, the fight between Amazon formats, Kindle formats, and EPUB is an interesting one because the Kindle and Amazon in general is pretty widespread. It's not that Amazon has sold that many Kindles, but keep in mind they have the Kindle app for the iPad and the Kindle app for the iPhone and Android and BlackBerry and Mac and Windows and all of that too. So, and they all use the same format. So frankly, what some people have suggested is that it's going to come down to EPUB versus Kindle. And Kindle may win out in some respects because they've got, the biggest store. They've, way more books available in Kindle format. And you can use a Kindle app on any device. And really the only significant player in the EPUB field, in my mind, is Apple. Lots of EPUB readers exist out there. All the other tablets and book readers and things that do EPUB besides the Kindle, but they're a drop in the bucket compared to the iPad and the iPhone. So, we'll see. It could come down to EPUB, Kindle, and PDF, with all three of them hanging on for dear life against the others. Certainly, we're not going to see any other formats catching on in the near future. But I don't really see Apple kowtowing, to the Kindle format. They just don't want to be beholden to Amazon in any way, shape, or form. EPUB's an open standard, and Apple can affect it as much as it can with any other open standard. So we won't be seeing Apple changing in any big way, I don't believe.
Chris, how about if we do one more? And we don't want to overstay our welcome. I know your folks have been sitting there for a while.
Anybody else have a question? Okay, well, I'll offer a question. Adam, you said that you're not very fond of Spotlight. I'm wondering what you use. Do you use something like Spot or Pathfinder?
I use my brain. The power of my brain.
God, we're all in trouble.
No, seriously. Don't get me wrong. There is a time and a place for searching. It's not like I go out on the web and I know exactly where I want. I use Google nonstop. This is part of the reason why I use Firefox, honestly, is that I can just type in the Firefox address bar and it will do the right thing. So it will search in Google. It will go to a site if it thinks that it can do that more accurately. I don't pretend to know where things are on the internet, but on my Mac, I do know where everything is. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You just have a filing system. If you have a logical filing system, everything is where you expect it to be. And so the only time when I have to search for something on my Mac is when for some reason it's a weird file that doesn't go where I expect it to be, or where honestly something has not ended up where it should be and I want to know why. Every now and then, I'll be working in Acrobat and I'll save something, and because Acrobat's previously saved to a different folder, the file will end up somewhere I don't expect, and I'm like, where'd it go? And I will then have to do a search to find it. But honestly, Spotlight just bugs the heck out of me. I also, because I know where my files are, I want to search by file name all the time. I did a TidBITs article on this, to how to tweak Spotlight so that it searches by file name in the folder you're in. Because again, usually I'm pretty close to where I want. I don't want to search my entire hard disk for a file name. That's just worthless. I have a pretty good idea of where it should be. And if it's not there, maybe I'll expand the search. But I'd rather have a focused search quickly and easily. A lot of folks use EasyFind, which is a free program from Devon Technologies. And all it does is, it searches on file names and it doesn't do any indexing. So it's not as necessarily as fast as Spotlight. But if you just want to say, I know what my file's named, this word's in the name, find it. EasyFind's a good way to go. The time when I like Spotlight is when I want to do something fancier. When I want to search on metadata. I want to find all of the music files that have a certain genre. That's the kind of thing where, Spotlight's great for that. And I'll use it for that. But honestly, I probably use Spotlight 2-3 times a month, and probably only 1 or 2 of those times is successful. So it often doesn't find what I want to find, more quickly than I could do it some other way. So, so it doesn't work the way I think. I happen to think in an organized way. It's not a problem for me. And that said, if I was taking a data soup approach, if I just had a big documents folder and I threw everything in there without any organization whatsoever, then I wouldn't have that problem. But there's actually another point here. Part of the reason why I don't have trouble staying organized is because what I do requires that things be in specific buckets. So for instance, I have a TidBITs articles folder, and everything has to be in that folder for our Subversion version control system to work. I can't put a TidBITs article anywhere else. It has to be there. When I'm uploading books to, the Take Control books, I have, the straight PDF format that gets uploaded. I have the zipped PDF format that's uploaded. I get the zip file that has the EPUB and MOBIs. Those are in individual folders because they have to map to folders out on the web for my entire system to work. So, as soon as you are dealing with larger systems, organization and file management becomes key. If it's just you and it doesn't matter, then maybe then Spotlight might just be fine because you don't have to interact with anything. Another example, we use Dropbox really heavily. Love Dropbox to death. If you are working with people and sharing files back and forth, get Dropbox. It's free. Just get it and install it. But we work with different authors, right? So we have a Take Control Glenn and Take Control Joe and Take Control Michael folder that is shared with the appropriate people. That's a folder. If I want to give Joe a file, it's got to go in that folder. So, so everything ends up being organized as a matter of working. I can't just strew things around and expect to have anything function. So that's partly why I don't like Spotlight. I also just wrote an interesting article about how my backups ate my photos. How I was fooled by my backup strategy into losing photos taken with my iPhone for several months. And this was actually Spotlight's fault in part because I had my clone, so I had my hard disk is called Zeus, and I had DoppelZeus, which is my clone made every night, on the desktop. Both of them were visible. And iPhoto, when you launch it and ask it to find another iPhoto library, will use Spotlight to find all the iPhoto library packages that exist on any mounted hard disk. Now, if I had put DoppelZeus in the Spotlight privacy pane, it wouldn't have done that. And I think I had done that at some point, but Spotlight, in my experience, loses track of things you put in that privacy pane. And so at some point, I switched my iPhoto library to the version on my clone. You can see where this is going. I would import photos into the clone iPhoto library, and then the next night, Carbon Copy Cloner would erase them. So it was really efficient. I would import them, it would erase them. I would import them, it would erase them. A little embarrassing. I didn't notice this for 2 months, but they were iPhone photos. They weren't my good photos. So this is the sort of thing where iPhoto and Spotlight were trying to be too clever for me. Instead of just giving me an open dialog where I could navigate around in the hierarchy that I'm used to and pick an iPhoto library, which is the way iTunes does it, for instance. So it's not like Apple, needs to use Spotlight this. iPhoto tried to get clever and just, give me a list of all of these things on Spotlight because I couldn't possibly have anything other than iPhoto libraries that would make sense in its mind. It didn't consider the possibility that I might have a clone version of my hard disk mounted on my desktop as well. So if you go to the TidBITs website, you can see the article on, Clone Wars or how my backups ate my photos. And it's got some clever little stuff about how to make sure if you're using a cloned hard disk that you don't run into this. And I have heard from people that someone else ran into trouble with Quicken. Quicken started using the clones version of the data file. And so, you need to be a little careful if you keep those clones around. So that's why I don't like Spotlight in 2,000 words or less.
Because they ate your photos.
They ate my photos, and I'm blaming Spotlight.
Well, thank you for joining us for our holiday meeting, gentlemen. I know everybody here enjoyed it.
Thank you for having us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And if I could just take advantage of Chuck's audience and mention that if anybody's watching this and isn't already aware of our group, check us out at ctmac.org.
And I will
Next
have
time you're in
links,
Connecticut.
Yeah.
I'll have links in the show notes to everything Adam talked about, that I talked about, and of course to the Connecticut Macintosh Connection. Thanks again, folks, for having us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Adam, thanks for your time. It's always a blast. We'll look forward to doing it again soon.
Oh, indeed. Thank you, Chuck.
Folks, we'll be back with more Road to Macworld series. We'll be back with more on MacVoices TV and all of the other MacVoices group shows. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices group and a member of Mac Level 10.